The monitoring station hung in space like a silver eye watching the darkness between stars. And inside that station, Senior Monitor Takara stood frozen at his console as every alarm system screamed at once. His forearms moved across the controls with practiced speed while his mind struggled to understand what his sensors were telling him. Something massive was coming into existence where nothing should be, appearing from a dimension that his people had never even theorized could exist. Impossible, he whispered in his native tongue. But the readings did not care about what was possible or impossible. They simply recorded what was happening behind him. His assistant Kroton moved closer to the main display where the spatial distortion grew larger with each passing second. Should we alert the Council fleet? Kroton asked. His voice tight with mirth, Kara's primary hand hovered over the emergency transmission button while his other three continued analyzing the incoming data. No jump signature, like the standard faster-than-light drives used throughout the galaxy. No warp trail indicating dimensional folding. No energy discharge that would mark a traditional emergence from hyperspace. This was something completely different. Something that made the fabric of reality ripple like water disturbed by a stone. And then, without warning or fanfare, a ship appeared. The vessel was massive. Easily 2 kilometers from bow to stern, with a hull that gleamed dark gray under the light of distant stars. Its design was unlike anything in the Council databases, with angular surfaces that seemed designed to deflect rather than absorb. Weapons ports that lined its flanks in precise geometric patterns, and at its bow, painted in white letters that contrasted sharply against the dark hull, were the words USS Sentinel. Run a database check, Takara ordered. His voice steadier than he felt inside. Kroton worked his console frantically, his fingers dancing across holographic keys that shimmered in the dim light of the monitoring station. No match in any Council records, Kroton reported after a long moment. The design elements don't correspond to any known species or faction. Takara felt his heart beating faster as he realized what this meant. Somewhere in the galaxy, someone had developed technology that the Council knew nothing about. Technology that allowed travel through dimensions that should not exist. Send a general alert to all Council vessels in this sector, he commanded. And get me a direct line to Director Zilmoth immediately. The transmission went out across space at faster-than-light speeds, while the mysterious ship simply hung there in the void, making no aggressive moves but also showing no signs of leaving. Within minutes, Council security vessels began arriving through traditional jump points, their hulls bearing the insignias of a dozen different species united under one galactic government aboard the USS Sentinel. Commander Daniel Warren stood on his bridge, watching the alien ship surround his vessel like predators circling prey. Though he knew that these particular predators had no idea what they were actually facing. Count? He asked calmly. Lieutenant Kevin Hayes looked up from his tactical station with a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. 15 ships and counting, sir, Hayes reported. Mix of Kryn dreadnoughts, Vestian cruisers, and what looks like a Sarathi diplomatic vessel. They're hailing us on all standard frequencies, Lieutenant Stephen Park added from communications, demanding we identify ourselves and explain our presence in Council space. Warren straightened his uniform jacket and nodded to Park. Open a channel, he ordered. Let's be polite about this. The view screen flickered to life, showing a Kryn official whose blue-scaled face wore an expression of barely contained rage mixed with confusion. Unidentified vessel. The Kryn began without preamble. You are in violation of Galactic Council Space Regulation 742. Identify yourself immediately and explain how you penetrated our borders without detection. Warren clasped his hands behind his back and met the alien's gaze with calm confidence. This is Commander Daniel Warren of the Earth vessel Sentinel, he said clearly. We mean no harm to the Council or its member species. The Kryn's expression shifted from anger to something else. something that looked almost like recognition mixed with disdain. "Earth?" the alien repeated, his voice dripping with contempt. "The primitives who were denied council membership 20 cycles ago because they could barely achieve orbit around their own planet?" Warren felt his jaw tighten but kept his voice level and professional. "We've made some improvements since then," he replied behind him. He heard Lieutenant Amanda Cross suppress a laugh from her position at the engineering station, where she monitored the fold space drive that had brought them here. The drive that represented humanity's greatest scientific achievement and the Council's biggest blind spot. "You will power down your weapon systems and submit to immediate inspection," the Kryn official declared. "Any resistance will be met with overwhelming force." Warren glanced at Hayes, who gave him a subtle shake of his head. The tactical officer's scans had already revealed that while the Council ships outnumbered them, the Sentinel shields and weapons were generations ahead of anything surrounding them. "I'm afraid I can't do that," Warren said politely. "However, I am willing to discuss this situation through proper diplomatic channels if you'll arrange a meeting with Council leadership." The Kryn's scales darkened with rage. "You dare refuse a direct order from the Galactic Council?" he demanded. "You prove exactly why your species was rejected. You are violent, primitive, and unable to follow basic civilized protocols." Warren was about to respond when Lunton Park interrupted with urgent information. "Sir, I'm picking up a distress signal," Park reported, his voice cutting through the tension. "It's coming from Palax 4, a colony world about 6 light years from here. Play it." Warren ordered. The bridge speakers crackled to life with a transmission filled with static and terror. Voices screaming in a language the translator struggled to interpret. Sounds of weapons fire and explosions, and underneath it all, a desperate plea for help that transcended language barriers. The Vrakan horde. "Sir," Hayes said quietly, pulling up data on his screen. "Slavers. They've been raiding the outer colonies for years, while the Council debates what to do about them." Warren looked at the view screen where the Kryn official was still ranting about protocol violations and proper procedures. "Director Zelmuth has authorized me to use force if necessary," the alien was saying. "Surrender now or face the consequences." But Warren was no longer listening to threats. He was listening to people dying while bureaucrats argued about jurisdiction and regulations. "Lieutenant Cross," he said, turning to his chief engineer, "how's our fold drive looking?" Amanda looked up with a grin that said she knew exactly what he was thinking. "Charged and ready, sir," she confirmed. "Just say the word." Warren turned back to the view screen and the angry Kryn official. "Tell Director Zelmuth that Earth didn't come here to ask for permission anymore," he said calmly. "We came to do what's right." He made a cutting motion across his throat, and Park killed the transmission. "Set course for Palax 4, Warren commanded. "Maximum fold speed. Let's show these people what humanity can do when someone actually needs help." The Sentinel's engines hummed with power as reality began to fold around the ship on the monitoring station. Takara watched in amazement as the human vessel simply vanished from existence without any of the telltale signs of traditional faster-than-light travel, appearing and disappearing in a series of impossible jumps that left the Council fleet scrambling to follow, and somewhere in the Council chambers on the capital world, Director Zelmuth received a report that made his blood run cold. The humans were going to Palax 4, where the Vrakan were conducting one of their largest raids in history, and they were going to interfere in a situation that the Council had been carefully avoiding for political reasons. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity did not care about political reasons when innocent people were dying. The USS Sentinel emerged from fold space above Palax 4 like a ghost materializing from thin air. And what Commander Warren saw on his view screen made his hands clench into fists 12. Vrakan warships orbited the colony world in a pattern designed for maximum terror. Their hulls were covered in spikes and jagged metal that served no practical purpose except to frighten. Plasma torches burned along their flanks where they had already begun cutting into civilian structures, and through transparent sections of their hulls. Warren could see holding cells already filled with captured colonists. "My God," Lieutenant Michelle Carter whispered from the helm, her normally steady voice shaking with rage below on the planet's surface. Fires burned in what had been peaceful farming communities, while the Rakan raiders moved through the streets, taking anyone who looked strong enough to work or young enough to sell. "How many civilians?" Warren asked quietly. Lieutenant Hayes worked his console with grim efficiency. "Estimates put the colony population at 40,000, he reported. "The Vrakan have already taken at least 3,000 captive and killed twice that many who resisted." Warren's jaw tightened as he watched one of the Vrakan ships fire on a building that his sensors identified as a school. "Hail them," he ordered. "Sir?" Park looked uncertain. "I said hail them," Warren repeated, his voice cold as ice in deep space. "Let's give them one chance to do the right thing." The view screen flickered, showing a Vrakan commander whose scarred face and cruel eyes spoke of decades spent inflicting suffering on those weaker than himself. "I am Admiral Kresh," the slaver announced with obvious pride, "and you are interrupting a profitable operation. Leave now, or I will add your crew to my collection." Warren leaned forward in his command chair. "This is Commander Daniel Warren of Earth," he said with deadly calm. "You have 10 seconds to release your captives and surrender yourselves to justice." Kresh threw back his head and laughed. "A sound like metal scraping against stone, Earth?" he repeated mockingly. "The Council rejects you and you come here pretending to be heroes? I have 12 warships and you have one. Your math skills are as poor as your judgment." Warren counted silently in his head. 10, 9, 8, 7. "Your 10 seconds are up," he said simply. "Lieutenant Hayes, you are authorized to engage." Kresh was still laughing when the first rail cannon round punched through his flagships. Shields like they were made of paper instead of advanced energy fields, designed to stop conventional weapons. The Vrakan Admiral's laughter died as his ship shuddered under the impact of a projectile moving at a significant fraction of light speed, carrying more kinetic energy than his shields had been designed to handle. "All ships, destroy them!" Kresh screamed at his subordinates. The Vrakan fleet turned toward the Sentinel with weapons charging, their tactics based on decades of raiding defenseless colonies, overwhelmed with numbers. Board the enemy vessel, enslave the survivors. But the USS Sentinel was not a defenseless colony. "Carter, evasive pattern Delta," Warren ordered calmly. "Hayes, light them up." Michelle Carter's hands danced across her controls as the ship twisted through space with impossible grace. She had been a racing pilot before joining Earth's military, and her skills had only improved with access to fold space. Micro-jump technology. The Sentinel seemed to flicker in and out of existence, appearing in one location only to vanish and reappear somewhere completely different a heartbeat later, while rail cannons fired continuously, each shot calculated by targeting computers that could track thousands of variables simultaneously. Ships tried to surround the human vessel, but found themselves shooting at empty space while their own hulls were torn apart by weapons they had no defense against. "Sir, Vrakan boarding craft are launching," Hayes reported. Warren allowed himself a cold smile. "Sergeant Cole, you're up," he said into the ship-wide comm system in the Sentinel's marine bay. Sergeant Brandon Cole and his team were already strapped into their drop pods, armored suits sealed and weapons checked. "You heard the man," Cole said to his squad. "Let's go introduce ourselves." The drop pods launched from the Sentinel, using the same fold space technology that powered the ship's main drive, appearing inside Vrakan vessels before the slavers even realized they were under attack from within. Cole's pod materialized in a Vraken holding area where terrified colonists huddled. Behind energy barriers, United States Marines, he announced calmly, raising his rifle toward the Vraken guards. You picked the wrong species to mess with. The guards reached for their weapons, but human reflexes enhanced by powered armor were faster. Cole's team moved through the ship like professionals, stunning guards and freeing prisoners with practiced efficiency aboard another Vraken vessel. Marine Lieutenant Rachel Morrison led her squad toward the engine room while the ship's crew panicked around them. Plant the charges here, and here, she ordered. Pointing to critical systems, we want them dead in space. Not dead. Her team worked quickly, placing explosive charges that would disable but not destroy while Morrison kept watch, her rifle tracking any movement in the corridor back on the Sentinel's bridge. Warren watched the tactical display as 11 Vraken ships found themselves crippled by internal sabotage while his rail cannons methodically destroyed their weapons and engines. Time? He asked. 8 minutes since engagement began, sir. Hayes reported with satisfaction. 8 minutes to defeat a fleet that had terrorized this region of space for years. Warren felt no pride in the victory, only satisfaction that the Vraken's reign of terror was ending. Admiral Crash's flagship made a desperate run for the jump point, its engines straining to escape. Let him go, Warren ordered, but tag his ship. I want to know where he runs to. Missile away, Hayes confirmed as a tracker attached itself to the fleeing Vraken vessel. The flagship vanished into faster-than-light travel, leaving behind 10 crippled warships and thousands of freed captives. Sir, we have incoming, Park announced. His voice tight with tension. Warren turned to see Council vessels emerging from their jump points. Led by the same Kryn official who had ordered him to surrender earlier, the alien's face appeared on the view screen, his expression a mix of shock and anger. You, the Kryn began, then seemed to lose his words as he looked at the burning Vraken ships. We received a distress call, Warren said calmly. We responded. It's what civilized people do. The Kryn scales flushed dark purple with rage. You engaged in unauthorized military action in Council space, he declared. You have violated a dozen treaties and regulations. Warren stood from his command chair and walked closer to the view screen. We saved 40,000 people that your council abandoned, he said quietly, but with steel in his voice. We stopped slavers that you've been debating about for years, while they destroyed lives and families. You will surrender yourself and your vessel immediately, the Kryn demanded. Or we will take you by force. Warren looked at the council fleet surrounding his position. 20 ships now, all with weapons pointed at the Sentinel. No, he said simply. The Kryn looked shocked. What did you say? I said no, Warren repeated. We're going to finish coordinating relief efforts for the colonists, and then we're going to leave. You're welcome to try and stop us, but I don't think you want to see how that ends. Behind him, his crew worked their stations with quiet confidence. They had just defeated 12 Vraken warships in 8 minutes, and everyone in the galaxy would soon know. The Kryn looked at his tactical displays, calculating odds, weighing options. This isn't over, he finally said. Director Zelmoth will want to speak with you personally. I look forward to it, Warren replied. Earth has a lot to say to the Council. The transmission ended and Warren returned to his chair. Status of the colonists? He asked. Medical teams are beaming down now. Dr. Lisa Morgan reported from sickbay. We'll have triage centers set up within the hour. Good, Warren said, settling into his seat. Let's show these people that humanity knows how to do more than just fight on the planet below. Freed colonists looked up at the sky, where a human warship had appeared from nowhere to save them from a fate worse than death. And word began to spread across the galaxy. Earth was back. And this time they weren't asking for permission. The council chambers on the capital world of Nexus Prime had stood for 10,000 years as a symbol of galactic unity. But today they felt more like a courtroom where Commander Daniel Warren stood accused of crimes he considered his duty. The holographic transmission made him appear life-size before the assembled council, members who represented dozens of species from across known space, each one sitting in judgment of humanity's actions. At Palax 4, Director Zelmoth occupied the central seat, his grin features arranged in an expression of righteous authority that Warren found both predictable and infuriating. Commander Warren, Zelmoth began with mock formality. You stand accused of unauthorized military action, violation of Council space sovereignty, possession of restricted technology, and endangering galactic peace. Warren stood at attention aboard the Sentinel's bridge, his crew watching from their stations as their captain faced down the most powerful governing body in the galaxy. I understand the charges, Warren replied calmly. Do I get to present a defense? Zelmoth waved one hand dismissively. You may speak, he said with the tone of someone granting a great favor. Warren nodded to Lieutenant Park, who began transmitting data files to the council chambers. 3 weeks ago, the colony of Palax 4 sent 17 separate requests for council protection, Warren began. They reported Vrakan scout ships in their system and asked for peacekeepers to be stationed in orbit. On the holographic displays around the chamber, the colonists' desperate messages played for all to see. The council response, Warren continued, was to refer the matter to committee for further study while assuring the colonists that the Vrakan pose no immediate threat. Zelmoth's cells darkened slightly, but he maintained his composure. The council must consider many factors before deploying military forces, he argued. We cannot respond to every unconfirmed report. Unconfirmed? Warren's voice took on an edge sharp enough to cut steel. We found 3,000 people in Vrakan, holding cells, and buried 6,000 more who died defending their homes. At what point does a report become confirmed enough for the council to care? Murmurs rippled through the chamber as several council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Councilor Mavera, an eldest of the Cerethi species, whose people had been members of the council since its founding, raised one slender hand. If I may, she said in her soft voice that nonetheless commanded attention. I would like to hear why the council chose not to respond to Palax 4's requests. Zelmoth looked annoyed at the interruption. The decision was made based on resource allocation and strategic priorities, he said stiffly. Warren saw his opening. Lieutenant Park, display file Gamma 7. He ordered new data flooded the council displays showing financial records, shipping manifests, and communications that painted a very different picture. These records show that Director Zelmoth and 6 other council members have significant investments in what they call neutral trade zones, Warren explained. Zones where the council conveniently chooses not to enforce laws against slavery. The chamber erupted into chaos as council members shouted denials and accusations while others demanded explanations. This is outrageous, Zelmoth roared, his scales turning almost black with rage. You dare accuse this council of corruption? I'm not accusing, Warren said quietly. I'm presenting evidence. There's a difference. Mavera studied the data with eyes that had seen millennia of galactic politics. These records appear authentic, she said thoughtfully. Director Zelmoth, can you explain why ships registered to your family's corporation have made over 50 trips to Vrakan-controlled space in the past year? Trade is not a crime, Zelmoth snapped. The council encouraged commerce in stolen goods and enslaved people. Warren interrupted. You're not traders. You're profiteers who benefit from the suffering you refuse to stop. Ambassador Rebecca Torres, Earth's official representative, who had spent 20 years being ignored by this same council, stood from her seat in the gallery. "If I may address the council," she said with quiet dignity. Loth looked ready to refuse, but Mavera gestured for her to continue. 20 years ago, Earth applied for council membership. Rebecca began. "We were told we were too violent, too primitive, not ready for civilized society." She walked toward the center of the chamber, her human frame small among the various alien species, but her presence commanding. "We were rejected because our history includes wars and conflicts," she continued. "Because we sometimes solve problems with force rather than endless debate." Zelmuth nodded smugly. "Exactly," he said. "Your species' violent nature makes you unsuitable. And yet," Rebecca cut him off, "when people were dying at Palax 4, it wasn't the civilized council that saved them. It was the violent humans who risked their lives to protect the innocent." The chamber fell silent as her words hung in the air. "You rejected us for having the courage to fight when fighting was necessary," Rebecca said, her voice growing stronger. "But maybe that's exactly what this galaxy needs. People who will actually do something instead of forming another committee to study the problem." Mavera looked at Rebecca with what might have been respect in her ancient eyes. "The eldest asks a question," she said formally. "If Earth no longer seeks council membership, what do you want?" Warren answered before Rebecca could speak. "Nothing," he said simply. "We don't need your permission to do what's right anymore. We spent 20 years developing our own technology, building our own ships, creating our own path." He gestured to the sentinel around him. "This ship and others like it were built by human hands using human science." Warren continued. "We didn't steal your technology or beg for your help. We did it ourselves because that's what humans do when told we can't do something." Zelmuth slammed his hand on the council table. "You cannot simply ignore council authority," he declared. "You are an outlaw species operating in our space." "Your space?" Warren's voice took on a dangerous quiet. "Last I checked, space doesn't belong to anyone. You claim authority over thousands of worlds and billions of people. But authority without responsibility is just tyranny." The director's eyes blazed with fury. "I will not be lectured by a representative of a species that has barely left its own star system," he shouted. "The council has maintained peace for 10,000 years. Peace for who?" Warren demanded. "Not for the people of Palax 4. Not for the thousands of other colonies you've abandoned to slavers and raiders while you debate procedures and protect your profits." Mavera raised her hand again, calling for silence. "The eldest recognizes that both parties have made valid points," she said diplomatically. "However, the question remains, what happens now?" Zelmuth stood from his seat, his full height imposing even through holographic transmission. "What happens now is simple," he declared. "Commander Warren, you and your vessel are hereby declared enemies of the Galactic Council. Any Earth ship found in Council space will be captured or destroyed, and any species offering aid to humanity will face sanctions." Warren met the director's gaze without flinching. "You're making a mistake," he said quietly. "The only mistake was allowing your species to develop unchecked." Zelmuth replied, "But that mistake ends now. Council security forces, you are authorized to engage Earth vessels on site." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving Warren standing on his bridge while his crew looked at him with a mixture of concern and determination. "Well," Lieutenant Hayes said dryly. "That went well." Warren allowed himself a slight smile. "Lieutenant Park, what's our sensor status?" Park checked his displays and frowned. "Sir, I'm reading multiple Council warships converging on our position," he reported, then paused. "And something else. 3 more signatures emerging from fold space." The view screen shifted to show 3 more Earth vessels appearing in perfect formation. The Guardian, the Ranger, and the defiant Warren's smile widened. "Looks like we won't be facing this alone," he said. "Open a channel to all Earth ships. The faces of 3 other captains appeared on his screen: Nicole Bennett, Eric Donovan, and Matthew Chun. Each one ready to stand with their fellow humans against whatever the galaxy threw at them. "Captain Warren," Nicole said with a slight smile. "Heard you started a war? Thought you might want some backup." Warren looked at his fellow commanders and felt pride swell in his chest. "Welcome to the party," he replied. "Things are about to get interesting." 4 Earth warships hung in space like predators showing their teeth, and surrounding them were 30 Council vessels representing 8 different species united by Director Zelmath's order to capture or destroy. The human threat commander Daniel Warren stood on the Sentinel's bridge watching the tactical display while listening to the open channel, connecting all 4 Earth captains. Quite the welcoming committee. Captain Nicole Bennett commented from The Guardian, her voice carrying the dry humor of someone who had faced worse odds. "Anyone want to bet on how this plays out?" "No bet," Captain Eric Donovan replied from the Ranger. "We all know how this ends." Captain Matthew Chun of the Defiant was studying his own sensor readings with the focused intensity of a chess master planning moves ahead. "Their formation is sloppy," he observed. "They're arranged to intimidate, not to fight effectively." Warren had to agree. The Council fleet surrounded them in a loose sphere that looked impressive, but left gaps in their coverage and created crossfire problems if shooting actually started. "Incoming transmission," Lieutenant Park announced. Its Fleet Commander Vartok of the Council Defense Forces. The view screen shifted to show a Sirithi warrior whose age showed in the scars crossing his face, but whose eyes still burned with the fire of someone who took his oaths seriously. "Earth vessels," Vartok began without preamble. "I am authorized to accept your surrender. Power down your weapons and prepare to be escorted to a Council holding facility." Warren glanced at his fellow captains on the split-screen display. Nicole gave him a slight nod that said she would follow his lead. "Fleet Commander," Warren replied with genuine respect. "I appreciate that you're following orders, but we both know I can't surrender my ship." Vartok's expression tightened. "I have no desire to fire on you." "Commander Warren," he said quietly, "what you did at Palax 4 was honorable. But honor will not protect you from 30 warships." "Maybe not," Warren agreed, "but technology might." "Commander, you're a soldier, not a politician. Can you honestly say the Council is in the right here?" The Sirithi warrior was silent for a long moment. "My opinions are irrelevant," he finally said. "I have my orders. Orders from a man who profits from slavery," Warren pressed. "Orders to attack people who saved innocent lives while the Council debated procedures." Vartok's jaw clenched. "Nevertheless, they are my orders," he said, then added quietly, "You have 1 minute to surrender. After that, I will open fire." The transmission ended and Warren turned to his crew. "Lieutenant Cross, how are we on full drive power?" Amanda looked up from her engineering station with a grin. "We could dance circles around them all day, sir," she reported. "The drives are performing above specifications." "Captain Warren," Nicole's voice came through the comm. "What's the play?" Warren thought about his options. They could run using their superior full drive technology, leaving the Council fleet behind while they regrouped. Or they could stay and prove a point that needed proving. He made his decision based on what he knew humanity needed. Not to run from bullies, but to stand up to them. "We stay," he announced. "But we don't fire first, and we only disable. Never destroy." "Understood," Eric confirmed from the Ranger. "My cyber warfare suite is ready." Matthew added from the Defiant. Warren watched the countdown timer on his display. 30 seconds until Vartok would have to follow through on his threat. "All ships pattern Omega on my mark," he ordered. "Let's show them what humans can do." The timer reached 0 and space erupted with weapons fire as 30 Council ships opened up simultaneously. But the 4 Earth vessels were no longer where the targeting computers expected them to be. using coordinated fold-space micro-jumps. They appeared throughout the battlefield in a pattern that seemed random, but was actually precisely calculated. The Sentinel materialized behind a Kryn dreadnought, fired a burst from its rail cannons that disabled the larger ship's weapons, then vanished before return fire could touch it. The Guardian appeared above a cluster of cruisers, deployed electronic countermeasures that scrambled their targeting systems, and jumped away as they fired blindly at empty space. The Ranger engaged in close quarters, maneuvering that would have been impossible for ships using conventional drives, its pilot executing turns and acceleration that human bodies enhanced by inertial dampeners could handle, but that left alien crews unconscious from G4 chest. Defiant became a ghost in the network. Matthew Chun's cyber warfare programs infiltrating Council communications and feeding false sensor data that had ships shooting at phantom targets. Sir, Council forces are adapting, Lieutenant Hayes reported. They're trying to predict our jump patterns. Let them try, Warren replied calmly. Carter, take us into the center of their formation. Michelle. Carter's hands flew across her controls as the Sentinel appeared in the middle of the Council sphere. Every enemy gun pointed inward toward the human ship. Weapons charged, Hayes confirmed. Hold fire, Warren ordered. Park, open a channel to all Council ships. The view screen showed multiple alien captains, all of them looking confused and angry. You're probably wondering why we haven't destroyed you yet, Warren said calmly. It's not because we can't. We've disabled 8 of your ships without breaking a sweat, and we could do the same to the rest. He paused to let that sink in. But we're not here to fight you, he continued. We're here to prove a point. Humanity doesn't want to conquer anyone or rule the galaxy. We just want the freedom to protect those who can't protect themselves. On another Council ship, a captain whose species Warren didn't recognize spoke up. You violated our space, ignored our laws. Your laws that allow slavery to continue unchecked? Warren interrupted. Your space that you claim but don't protect? We saved 40,000 people that you abandoned, and instead of thanking us, you declared us enemies. The channel erupted with multiple voices arguing simultaneously until Vartok's command override silenced them all. Enough, the Sirathi commander declared. Then he did something unexpected. He laughed. You are either the bravest humans I have ever encountered or the most foolish, Vartok said. But you have made your point. I have spent 30 cycles following orders from politicians who have never seen combat, watching as they debate while people die. He stood from his command chair. I will not fire on those who do what I should have done, he announced. All ships under my direct command, stand down. Warren felt hope surge in his chest as 15 Council vessels powered down their weapons, but victory was short-lived. LaVue and Park's urgent voice cut through the celebration. Sir, long-range sensors are detecting a massive fleet jumping into this sector, he reported, his voice tight with alarm. Configuration matches Vrakan warships. Hundreds of them. The view screen shifted to show the incoming armada. Admiral Kresh had rallied his entire slaver empire, and they were heading toward Council space with clear hostile intent. They're broadcasting on all frequencies, Park continued. Kresh is demanding revenge for his losses at Palax 4. Warren felt his blood run cold as he read the trajectory data. They're not coming for us, he said quietly. They're heading for Earth. The bridge fell silent as everyone processed what that meant. While they had been arguing with the Council, an army of slavers was preparing to attack humanity's home world. Vartok appeared on the view screen. His expression grim. Commander Warren, he said formally, I may not agree with all of the Council's decisions, but I will not stand by while an army of slavers attacks any inhabited world. The Sirathi warrior straightened in his chair. My ships are at your disposal, he offered. Will you accept our help in defending your people? Warren looked at the sensor readout showing hundreds of Rakan warships bearing down on Earth. Then at the Council Commander offering alliance with former enemies. The choice should have been easy. Let the Council that rejected humanity face the consequences of their own failures, while Earth defended itself. But that wasn't who humans were. And Warren knew it. Earth can defend itself, he said quietly. But those Rakan ships will pass through Council space on their way to us. And there are dozens of colonies in their path. He met Vardak's eyes across the view screen. If we're going to stop them, we stop them here, Warren declared, before they can hurt anyone else. Vartak nodded with what looked like respect. Then we fight. Together, he agreed. Warren opened the channel to all 4 Earth ships. Looks like we're about to find out if the galaxy is ready for what happens when humans and aliens actually work. Together, he said, all ships, prepare for combat operations. Let's show Crash what happens when you threaten Earth. The Vrakan Armada came out of faster-than-light travel like a plague descending on healthy tissue. Hundreds of warships bristling with weapons and holding cells ready to be filled with new slaves. Admiral Crash stood on the bridge of his new flagship, his eyes burning with hatred as he looked at the sensor display showing the pathetic defense force waiting for him. 4 human vessels and 15 council ships that had betrayed their own kind to side with primitives. They think 19 ships can stop us. He laughed, his voice echoing through the comm system to his entire fleet. We will crush them and then burn Earth until nothing remains but ash and slaves. But as his sensors got a clearer picture of the defenders' position, something made him pause. The ships weren't arranged in a defensive formation. They were spread out in a pattern that made no tactical sense unless all ships evasive maneuvers. He screamed, but it was already too late. Space rippled as 12 more Earth warships emerged from fold space in perfect coordination, appearing throughout the Vrakan formation like sharks materializing in a school of fish. General Paul Anderson's voice boomed across all frequencies from the newly arrived USS Resolute. This is Earth Defense Command, he announced with absolute authority. You have entered protected space with hostile intent. Surrender now or face immediate and overwhelming force. Crash snarled in rage. He had expected to face token resistance, not a coordinated military response. Attack, he ordered. All ships, fire at will. The battle began with the Vrakan fleet trying to use their numerical advantage. But numbers meant nothing when fighting opponents who could appear and disappear at will. Commander Warren coordinated with the other Earth captains through quantum-linked communications that updated in real-time pattern. Delta 7, he ordered. Council ships, maintain defensive positions around the colony worlds in this sector. Fleet Commander Vardak acknowledged the order and moved his vessels to protect civilian populations while the Earthships engaged in offensive operations. The USS Sentinel appeared beside a Vrakan cruiser, fired a burst that crippled its engines, then jumped away before the enemy could respond. This was repeated 1,000 times across the battlefield, as 16 Earth warships used their full drive technology to maximum effect. But the true genius of the human strategy became apparent when Captain Matthew Chun activated the cyber warfare suite he had been preparing. Initiating network infiltration, he announced calmly from the Defiant. Across the Vrakan fleet, communication systems began feeding false data, targeting computers locked on the phantom signatures, and navigation systems reported coordinates that were off by critical margins. Vrakan ships found themselves shooting at empty space or worse, hitting their own vessels as their sensors told them enemies were where allies actually stood. What is happening? Crash demanded as his fleet descended into chaos. Report. His tactical officer worked frantically at damage controls. Sir, Our entire network has been compromised, the officer reported. The humans have some kind of virus in our systems. Kresh felt fear creeping into his heart for the first time in decades. Purge the network, he ordered. Go to manual controls. But while the Vrakkans struggled with their compromised systems, the Earth ships pressed their advantage. Sergeant Brandon Cole and his Marines deployed throughout the Vrakkan fleet using fold space insertion, appearing inside slave-holding ships to free captives and disable critical systems. Third deck secured, Cole reported as his team moved through a Vrakkan vessel. We've got 200 captives heading to the transport ships. Throughout the battle, Earth forces prioritized the liberation of slaves over the destruction of enemy vessels. Every ship that carried prisoners was boarded and cleared before being left. Adrift Captain Nicole Bennett coordinated the rescue operations from the Guardian while simultaneously covering fire for the Marine teams. Transport 7 is full, she announced, sending them back to Council medical facilities. The Vrakkan fleet began to break apart as captains realized they were not fighting disorganized defenders, but a coordinated military force that was superior in every meaningful ways. Ships attempted to flee but found their navigation systems still corrupted by Chun's cyber warfare programs. Others tried to surrender but discovered that humans demanded unconditional release of all captives as a precondition. Kresh watched his armada crumble around him and felt something he had inflicted on countless others. True despair. All ships, retreat to Rally Point 7. He ordered, but even his own flagship systems were failing. The USS Sentinel appeared directly in front of Kresh's vessel. Its weapons trained on the bridge. Warren's voice came through the comm system with cold finality. Admiral Kresh, he said, you have a choice. Surrender yourself and your fleet for trial, or we disable your ship and take you by force. Kresh's hand moved toward his weapon, his mind refusing to accept defeat. I will never surrender to primitives, he roared. So be it, Warren replied, and nodded to Lieutenant Hayes. The Sentinel's rail cannons fired with surgical precision, destroying the flagship's bridge and everyone on it in a single devastating strike with their leader dead. The remaining Vrakkan fleet lost what little cohesion they had left. Kresh's second-in-command, an officer named Vorn who had questioned his leader's suicide mission from the beginning, took control of what remained. All Vrakkan ships, cease fire, Vorn ordered, his voice heavy with exhaustion. We surrender unconditionally. The battle ended not with a final explosion, but with the quiet humming of weapons powering down and the opening of docking bays to receive boarding parties. One stood on his bridge, looking at the tactical display. Of the hundreds of Vrakkan ships that had attacked, fewer than half remained operational, and all of those were now in custody. Status report, he requested. All Earth vessels reporting minimal damage. Lieutenant Hayes confirmed. Council ships suffered no casualties thanks to the defensive positions. Marine teams report over 15,000 captives liberated, Sergeant Cole added. We're coordinating with Council medical facilities for their care. Warren felt the tension drain from his shoulders. They had won, and more importantly, they had won without becoming the monsters they fought against. A transmission request came through from Council chambers on Nexus Prime. And this time, it was not Director Zelma's face that appeared, but Councilor Maveras, Commander Warren. She said with a gentle smile, the Council has been watching your battle. We have also been conducting our own behind her. Warren could see security forces escorting Zelmoth and several other Council members away in restraints. Director Zelmoth has been removed from his position and will face charges of corruption and criminal negligence. Mavera continued, the Council recognizes that we have failed in our most basic duty, to protect the innocent. She straightened in her seat. Earth's application for Council membership is hereby approved with full honors, she announced. Furthermore, The Council requests that humanity assist in forming a joint task force to combat slavery throughout the galaxy. Warren looked at his crew. These humans who had proven that strength and compassion could exist together, and smiled. "We accept," he said. "On the condition that the Council actually follows through on protecting people, instead of just debating it," Mavera laughed. "A sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. I believe we can manage that." She agreed. "Welcome to the Galactic Council." "Commander Warren." The transmission ended and Warren turned to face his crew. "Lieutenant Cross, how are the full drives holding up?" Amanda grinned from her station. "Running perfectly, sir," she reported. "Ready for whatever comes next, Lieutenant Carter." "Plot a course for the frontier colonies," Warren ordered. "I want to check on the settlements that the Council hasn't been able to reach." Michelle's hands moved across her controls. "Course plotted and ready." "Sir," she confirmed. Warren settled into his command chair and looked out at the stars that humanity was now free to explore as equals. "There are a lot of people out there who need help," he said quietly. "People who need to know that someone cares enough to show up when things get bad." He thought about Earth emerging from isolation, about humans proving themselves not through conquest, but through courage, about the galaxy learning that the species they had rejected was exactly what they needed. "Take us out," he ordered. "Let's go show the galaxy what humanity stands for." The USS Sentinel engaged its full drive and vanished into the dimensions between dimensions, carrying with it a promise that would echo across the stars. Earth was here, and the innocent need fear no more behind them. Council ships and Earth vessels worked together, clearing the battlefield and caring for freed captives, while news spread across the galaxy of the species that had emerged from empty space and changed everything. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, other threats watched and wondered what it meant that humanity had arrived. Not as conquerors, but as guardians. The galaxy had quaked when the warship emerged, but it would tremble even more when it learned the full truth. Earth had not sent one ship, or 4 or 16. Humanity had built an entire fleet, and they were ready to defend anyone who needed defending, to stand up for those who could not stand for themselves, to be the shield that the galaxy had been missing. From empty space they had come, and the universe would never be the same.